the Safer Grant. This is the grant that recently expired that funded up to 12 firefighters for the Salisbury Fire Department. I'm going to ask Chief Hoppus if you wouldn't mind coming forward so that we can have you involved in the discussion. If you wouldn't mind. Thank you. First things first, to Chief Hoppus and to Tom Stevenson and the administration. The purpose of the council discussion, the request for council discussion, was to discuss the fact that we are now in the expired period of this grant, and so we have had to temporarily or permanently lay off the employees who are funded by the Safer Grant. My understanding is 9 of the original recipients of the Safer Grant or employees have been hired on permanently, but we've backfilled each of those positions as those employees have filled permanent positions, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So again, the purpose of the discussion was so the council could discuss the impacts on surface, the impacts on our public safety, of course, impacts on the fire department organizationally, and have an opportunity to hear what those impacts might be and to discuss those impacts. Now, for everyone's edification, it is my understanding that council can't forward a budget amendment. That has to come from the administration. So we're not talking about a budget amendment tonight. We're not talking about any specific action. We're discussing the impacts and whether or not there's a course forward, as well as I think it would be useful to hear and talk about the status of the next application round for the Safer Grant. So with that, it would be useful to me, whether you want it to come from you or Chief Hoppus, it would be useful to me to hear any additional information or answers to those questions that the administration has.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Council President. What the mayor has asked me to do is read a prepared statement, and then likely beyond that, we would be stepping away from the podium, so to speak, and allowing the council the opportunity to discuss the fire service agreement, forgive me, the Safer Grant. If there were any questions that we needed to ask, we would probably bring that information back at a later date. So we'd be taking questions beyond my prepared statement from the mayor, if I may. The mayor believes that the loss of the Salisbury Fire Safer Grant firefighters is directly linked to the ongoing debate among the long-expired fire service agreement between Wicomico County and the City of Salisbury. As of Friday, November 28, 2014, the Safer Grant expired. This grant was never meant to hire firefighters on a permanent position status. It is the mayor's hope that the council will consider the underlying cause of why more fire service personnel aren't hired, and that is the lack of a fire service agreement with Wicomico County. The Salisbury Fire Department currently services 56.58% of Wicomico County, which is outside the city limits, by responding to 63% of all fire calls and 67% of all EMS calls which originate in the county. This service amounts to $2.2 million in cost. Again, that's $2.2 million in cost. This money is not paid back to the City of Salisbury. The City of Salisbury will extend a request to Wicomico County to address this financial disparity on Friday, January 2nd, 2015. This is the first working day of the new calendar year. The mayor believes that the taxpayers will benefit from the following: a new fire service agreement that pays Salisbury to the full extent of what services provided to Wicomico County residents, no movement of funds from other city departments to pay for extending the Safer Grant officers, no use of surplus funds to pay or extend the Safer Grant. Taxpayers have already paid for the service in the county, and if they had to pay it again, they'd be paying it twice. We did activate 2 frozen positions within the fire service. They were hired on, and 11 of the original fire service grant officers were hired. We extended the life of the grant by 6 weeks to keep them on for a longer period of time. We are applying for a SAFER grant again in hopes of being granted the award in 2015. The fair and equitable response to extending SAFER grant officers into permanent status is for our fire leadership, including myself, that being the mayor, the city council, our 3 volunteer companies, our local IAFF, International Association of Firefighters, Chief?
Yes.
Got that one, didn't I? Thank you. And the public to call on Wycomico County leaders to fix the tax burden inequity in 2015. That's the message from the mayor. Thank you.
Okay. And the administration doesn't want to offer anything else or participate in discussion?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Well then, Chief, if you don't, if you have nothing else to add at this point, you don't have to sit up here with us. What I will ask of both of you is we obviously have firefighters in the room, and I do plan on taking public comment. Are you comfortable with firefighters providing public comment?
Absolutely. I am prepared to answer specific questions. I think you posed very relevant questions about impact operations and new deadlines for SAFER. I'm prepared to answer those, and I'm sure that the administration has no issues with answering those very specific questions as it relates to impact operations.
Okay.
If at any time, I can defer.
I'd do it right now because you know, I think just basic information is useful.
Yeah, and it is very basic because that's all we have. So,
Please.
I'd ask for council to pose a question.
Okay, my specific question is regarding if the effect on operations due to a reduction of staffing. I'd like to understand what those effects would be.
Yeah, our current model of operation is we staff a career fire engine crew in Station 16 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and Monday through Friday between the hours of 7 and 5 at Stations 1 and 2. That will not change. The reduction will simply be in 1 less person per unit.
Per apparatus?
Per apparatus, that's correct.
All right. Will there be an impact to weekends, nights?
No change except for the reduction of 1 at the 24-hour day station.
Okay. Okay. All right. One of the things that we heard a lot about leading up to this was the impact on the SAFER grant on response time. I would presume that there would be an equal increase in response times, in average response time. Is that your understanding? Is that what you would anticipate?
The response time question would be as it relates to having Fire Station 1 opened or closed. The SAFER grant allowed us to reopen Station 1 that had been closed due to budgetary cuts, and previously it will remain open.
Okay. Other questions from council?
Yeah, can you share with us the fiscal impact of these layoffs as opposed to, particularly regarding the unemployment insurance estimate cost, if you have that, the increased overtime to cover, because this is, my understanding was this takes us back to 2010 staffing, which is bare bones. Somebody gets sick, somebody goes on vacation, there's no one to cover. So how will that impact? I remember that we had a much higher number for overtime at that point, and then we dropped it because we had additional staff.
Yeah,
is that going to go back up?
And unfortunately, I'm not prepared. I don't have the numbers and all that information in front of me, Councilwoman. I'd be happy to get back with council with those specific numbers.
Can we add that to the list?
Working
Okay.
on it.
Okay. Other questions?
There are a lot of questions, but apparently moot.
Well, I think we've pretty much hit the crux of what the difficulty is, so.
Well, we know that, and we've had that problem.
Right.
And we're not even sending the letter until January.
Yeah, what's the current status of the SAFER grant application? Is that something either of you is willing to or able to answer?
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, it's out of our control. It is something that is completely in FEMA's control since they're the grant administrators. We've been in contact. I know at least some of the members of the council have been in contact with contacts in FEMA, and it looks as though, given the latest results of the latest election, it looks as though that's still in flux. We had been originally told that the grant guidance document was going to come out in December. We are holding to that because it's the last information we have, and that grant application period would open up in January. But we're not even our confidence level has decreased since our last conversation with FEMA. So we're at this point, it's still in a state of flux that we really just don't have the information because they're not forthcoming with it, and therefore we don't have it.
Okay. All right. Well, I have a few other questions and points that we can pose to the administration that we can do after hearing from some of the guests that we have in the room. So with that, I'd like to offer an opportunity for, if you don't mind. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you,
Are those
Chief.
reviews of, Chief,
I'm sorry.
you have some documents in your hand. Are those reviews of what you gave us previously?
No, all of this documentation relates to the previous discussion in closed session.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, which, by the way, I should point out was regarding the fire service agreement. Council in closed session did discuss language regarding a letter that would be sent from mayor and council to the county executive regarding the subject of fire service agreement. And council did agree to the language and request in that letter. So at this time, I'd invite any of the members of the fire department who wish to speak to come forward. Just remember to please introduce yourself into the microphone. Please.
Good evening. My name is James Gardner. I am a city taxpayer, businessman in the city, also Safer Grant, former Safer Grant employee. Some things that I want to emphasize, we're harping on response times out of the station. Response times out of the stations are great, but if we get on the scene and we don't have enough people on the fire truck to do anything, then what difference does it make to get there fast? You understand what I'm saying? NFPA, which is the national standard, says that we have to have 2 in and 2 out. We can do that as long as we get all 3 pieces there. Okay? We might have a piece that's on another call, might be out in the county. We're not going to get enough people. We're going to have to do an outside attack. That's squirting water in the windows. Somebody's in there. We're not, we might not be able to go in there with 1 person. We're going to do our best, but those are things we got to think about. I had a whole bunch of stuff here to talk about. We run 8,000 EMS responses a year. Okay, 2,500 fire responses a year. That's going to tax the ability for these guys, men and women. It's going to wear them out. I mean, you're talking about running a lot of calls, doing a lot of things with very few, very little manpower. Firefighting's not an easy job. It takes a lot of effort. We have to switch crews in and out, and we just don't have, the staffing is not there. What we're running at this time without the safer people, we're going to run 1 engine, staffed 24 hours. That'll be an engine out of Station 16 at the headquarters. 1 engine, 1 fire truck. We're going to run 2 quints. A quint is the ladder truck, which has a pump and 2 hoses on it. It's going to run with 3 people on it. We have 2 of those that are going to run 7 in the morning until 5:30 in the evening. Okay, no 24 hours, not at night. They're going to be staffed by volunteers at night, which sometimes get out and sometimes don't. A working fire doubles every 30 seconds. So you think of those response times and how long it takes us to get to the fire. Every 30 seconds, that fire doubles. So if The volunteers come, they're coming from home. They have a 5-minute response time to get to the station. Okay? That's 5 minutes that fire's building. Okay? 2 times every 30 seconds. Now they got to get on the piece. If they get there in 5 minutes, they got to get on the piece. Most of the time it's a 10-minute response. To get everybody there, they got to get at least 3 people there before they can leave the station. All right? And then they got to get to the fire. Now the engine from 16 is going immediately. That's a 24-hour, but that's only 3 people. Okay? Those are the things that we got to remember. We're cutting down. We have 5 ambulances in the city. We're cutting down to 3 to run 8,000 EMS calls. Almost every day, we have to run a 4th and a 5th run ambulance. Without the safer people, we're not going to be able to do it. We don't have the staffing. Those are things that we got to think about. During the day, we can have the administration, the chiefs can come out of the office and run the ambulances. So during the day, the ambulance, the 4th run ambulance will probably get out. The 5th run, I doubt it. It's relating on the volunteers. Okay? The other thing, it's a financial impact in 2 ways. For myself as a business owner, the fire insurance rating is going to go down, which is going to make everybody's fire insurance go up. Because all of this impacts the fire insurance and the amount of response time and amount of equipment that you can get on the scene in an effective way. Again, you can get all the equipment you want, but if you don't have the manpower, then you don't have anything. And we're talking 3 people on a piece of apparatus. The driver, he's got to stay with the pump because he's got to pump the water. The officer, he's got to do all of his walk around. He's got to be able to know what's going on all the way 360 degrees around that building, so he really can't go in either, at least not for the first 2 or 3 minutes that he's there. And then the 3rd person, that's the guy that's got to pull the hose, beat the door down if it's not unlocked, throw a ladder to get up to a 2nd story, or throw a ladder to get on a roof, or make sure that we have another way of getting out of the house if somebody, heaven forbid, gets in trouble, one of us, and has to get out fast. So all those things come into play. It's not just, 3 firefighters getting to the scene and everybody's doing their thing. Everybody's got a specific job. And with that 4th firefighter on that truck, 4th or 5th would be great. You can get done so much faster because everybody does something. You don't have to wait for that next truck that's coming 10 minutes later that this fire is building every 30 seconds. The financial impact also with the EMS, with 8,000 calls and those 4th and 5th run ambulances, every time one of those ambulances doesn't get out and a county ambulance has to come in, we lose money. $600 at the minimum per call. Okay, times 2 or 3 a day, times that by 365, that's a lot of money. Now, last year, I think it's around $2 million that we collected on EMS billing fees. Now, we were just in here last work session talking about EMS billing. You guys know the numbers. You know how much money it is. That doesn't come back to the fire department. That goes in the general fund. Pays the light bills. It pays, everything but fire department stuff. Those are things that the fire department needs. And we can't, we're like you guys, we're like the city. We can't operate with nothing. The mayor can't operate without you. So we need people. And the last thing I want to say as the business end of it, every time my cost as a businessman goes up, I have to transfer it to somebody else, and it trickles right on down the line. So with the economy as bad as it is, nobody wants to have to pay more taxes. Nobody wants to have to pay more fees and everything else. But we got to do the right thing. We've got to save the citizens of Salisbury. Just Friday, we had the first fatality in the city. Right? And it wasn't because of non-personnel, but it happens. The fire department's like an insurance policy. We're there, and we're there when you need us. But if you cut your insurance when something happens, guess what? You're cutting your nose. We got one of the biggest ports in the whole country, right here, gas oil, ethanol. You know, there's tugs coming up and down, and grain. Grain's one of the most volatile things in the world. Grain dust. I mean, there's a bomb waiting to happen. You know? We also do the specialty services, hazmat, confined space. All that stuff is also included, which is all going to be, you know, there's not going to be enough manpower. And if I haven't taken too long, I've got just 2 pieces that other grant members wrote that I'd like to read, if we can do that.
Do you have you don't happen to have copies, do you?
I can give you these copies.
Can we do that instead, in the interest of time?
Yeah. Both of them want to remain anonymous, so I want to take the name off of this one, if that's okay.
Yeah, if you could provide copies, and then
Actually,
Ms. Nichols can make copies for everyone.
okay, and I can email them to you as well.
That'd be
I'll do
fine.
that after the meeting because I have the technology. But is there any questions you guys have for us, for me?
Not at this
I
point in
mean,
time.
I've been a volunteer firefighter for 22 years. I went all the way to chief as rank. I know what the chief's going through. I know what you guys are going through. I've done the budget processes. But this is something that really has to be looked at. You know, the citizens of Salisbury have paid for this service, and now they're not going to get it. That's the bottom line. They've paid for it, and now we're not going to be able to provide it until the grant comes back around again. So if at any way that you can fund it, partially fund it, you know, talk to the chief and get bare minimum, you know, whatever we can do to serve the citizens of Salisbury better, that's what we need to do. And I don't want to say at any cost, because I know money's money, but if it's my kids or my mom or my relative in that house or that can't breathe, I want somebody there quick. And you know, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Aaron Colgrove, firefighter paramedic. Been employed here for a little over 8 years now. Obviously, thank you, council. Appreciate putting this on the agenda, being able to allow us to come through to have one last discussion. First off, as we've discussed numerous times in the past, you know, every year for the last 6 or 7 years that I've been coming into council meetings, coming into the budget, staffing's been our #1 issue. It's been #1 from the get-go. The chief, I know his hands get tied when it comes to asking for staff, excuse me, for staff and for pay, etc. But we came in here from the employees, you know, from myself, president of the Salisbury Career Firefighter Association, saying that we need staffing, we need staffing. We have in the past given different options. We've been told from the council and the mayor throughout numerous years, when you can come up with a solution, come up with a solution. And we did that with the SAFER grant. We came in here 5 months ago now, 6 months ago, and handed a list 1 through 6 or 1 through 5 and said, here's different options that we can do to help try to retain these SAFER employees. And just asking to have them entertained obviously didn't get any place initially. I mean, now, you know, this is a discussion now, which I, you know, thank you for that. However, previous years before that, we said we need to increase our staffing, and it's going to be just a continuous cycle. It's going to be a rotation for the safety of ourselves and for the safety of all the citizens that, you know, we raise our hands and we're sworn in to protect. Without the manpower, it's impossible to do. These last 2 years has been great. Our response times are keeping the fire to the room of origin. You know, all those statistics, and I know you guys have seen tons of paperwork and bar graphs showing those. And it just proves that obviously the manpower is what stands behind all the arguments that we've gone through. As far as the SAFER grant itself, you know, one of the options was trying to cover that gap between the end of the budget of the contract through if we're able to reapply for it. That was one of the options. And we had different ideas of funding, and it was unable to obviously at that time be I guess, entertained, and now it is. If it's funding coming from wherever, I know it takes an amendment. It's just, you know, we have the numbers that show that we need to have the employees, no matter if it's safer or not safer. The statistics show that we need to have the staffing. Like NFPA says we should have 88 personnel. We have 62, I think is what it is. So, I mean, with the safer employees, we had 74. That's not even up to where NFPA says that we should have running 24 hours a day, you know, in the city of Salisbury. We run a lot of calls. You know, the statistics are the statistics. We can't change that. You know, I ask, you know, again, to entertain any option possible to retain the safer employees, to in 2 months or 3 months from now, to come back up with solution, you know, X, Y, and Z. Yeah, I've asked numerous times to come in here, besides once a year during the budget hearings and during the budget sessions. Why can't we meet, you know, twice a year? Why can't we meet quarterly? Just to come up with different ideas, have different solutions, work together, you know, and here we are still meeting just once a year. That's during budget sessions, unless it's, you know, the long lines of this right here. I applaud the council and the mayor and everybody for the revitalization of downtown, for, you know, the growth that's going on in this area, all the apartment complexes now that are blowing up, the university that grows larger every year. What about your public safety infrastructure? The more people that come in here, the more businesses that open up, the more housing and apartment complexes you put in here, you got to do something. I mean, eventually, you know, they said earlier about the mutual aid coming in. You're right, they do. Today we were working, we had to have another ambulance come in to handle the call for us. It's just the way that it works. And I mean, money's money, and it's, I know, you know, with the economy the way it was in the past and the way that things have rolled over into last year, this year, you know, everybody has their own job to do, and it's tough to figure things out, but eventually there has to come to a time where you got to face the facts, and we have to have staffing. It's, you know, just every year, anywhere from 6 to 8 to 10% of our call volume goes up year after year after year. And I ask for the council and, you know, just to all work together and try to come up with some sort of funding, retain the safer for 2 or 3, you know, months, whatever it might be. If we get reinstated, perfect. If not, still need staffing. I mean, staffing for safety for us and for the citizens. So I appreciate you giving us this opportunity to have a few last words, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Colbert.
Good evening. Michael Rund. I'm the president of the Professional Firefighters of Maryland. We're the organization that represents the career firefighters across the state of Maryland. And Aaron called me about this issue, and I was down here 2 years ago testifying, encouraging this council to take that grant, and I applaud you for doing so. But I sat here and I listened to what the mayor's statement was for the reasons for not pursuing this. And to be quite honest with you, I find it appalling that we're using politics, that the safety of our members, the fact that there's no agreement between the council and the county as far as the mutual aid agreement. Our members are putting their lives at risk for the citizens of this city. They're the ones that are sworn to protect, and they can't do that without sufficient people on the fire ground. It's not just going in with putting water on a fire and it's over. It's a coordinated effort between a truck company and an engine company, and those things have to happen quick. And if they don't, the fire escalates. So I encourage you to please try and find a way to staff these apparatus, the bodies needed to put the fire out effectively and safely, not only for our members, but for the citizens that live here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to the issue? No? Okay. You want to say something?
Yeah.
Yes, Ms. Shields?
I've been sitting here thinking the same as the gentleman just spoke, Michael.
Yes.
I'm going to pretend and say that we don't get the SAFER grant and we don't get the Forest Service agreement. And I look back and I always say the police department came and wanted 10 officers, and we wholeheartedly supported that. So we have some people here that's saving lives through fire prevention and EMS. People have heart attacks and whatever other kind of attacks, asthma attacks, and they take them to the hospital or keeping them from being burned up in a fire, and we're sitting here debating on a safer grant, I'm assuming you're not going to get it. I'm just assuming, not saying you won't get it, but I'm assuming that you're not going to get it. And I'm going to assume that Wycomico County is not going to come forth with the mutual aid agreement. I'm assuming that, because they haven't done so far. And I agree we should not put politics in something as serious as this. We do budget amendments all the time for stuff. Sometimes I agree, sometimes I disagree. And I think public safety, as we did with the police department, the fire department should have equal billing. And I think it should not be a thought process. I know it comes from the mayor's office, but the right is to do the right thing. Put our citizens first and all the other stuff in the background. Our citizens and employees should come first. We don't want them to work in unsafe conditions. That's why we got the equipment. We want them to work not stressed out. That's why we applied, I believe, for the safer grant, to give more people to do the work. Now we're debating on safer grants and municipal, fire safe service agreements. We need to get the staffing that's supposed to be for the fire department. And I believe that I'm pleading to the mayor now that he should find it in his heart to do a budget amendment, which I would support, to bring the staffing where it's supposed to be, then replace the personnel that was lost, at least through the Safer Grant, and keep them as permanent fixtures in our fire department. Because I know Aaron has been here, I've been here almost 10 years, and this has always been the problem. And I think that we can solve the problem. We're getting ready to have our audit report, and it seems like we're in pretty good standing. So whatever it costs, I'm not saying not work with Wycomico County, get on Wycomico County's case, because I think that's disgraceful too. But right now, we can't worry about what Wycomico County is going to do. I'm assuming they're not going to do anything. But we need to bring the fire department up to where they're supposed to be. And I think all citizens, as I said before, that if we educated the people about the agreement that we're not getting, I think we also need to educate the people on the needs of our fire department, so they won't, that's money not wasted. You know, you hear people say, I'm a taxpayer and you're wasting our dollars. I don't believe that the taxpayers in Salisbury City or Wycomico County would feel that this is a wasted tax dollars being spent. I think they would think more, well, if my house caught on fire, who would put it out? Or if my mother or daughter or father had a heart attack, who would come take them to the hospital? So I'm asking Mr. Stevens, our city administrator, to plead, tell him I'm pleading with him to do a budget amendment to bring the staffing and replace the safer personnel that had to be laid off into a budget amendment.
So noted.
Thank you.
Any other comments from council?
Yes.
Mr. Spees?
When we first took the SAFER grant, the council asked the chief, and I'm speaking as a devil's advocate here, should the grant not be renewed, would we be able to retain those officers? And I believe the chief's response was, yes, we would do it by whatever way we could, by hook or by crook. We would find a way to do this, but that's all in the past. But I look now at, we are growing. We've grown, you know, the city has grown considerably over the past 10 years. And with that growth, we have to absorb the needs and the costs of what growth amounts to. You know, when you put more buildings up, you're going to have more responsibility for putting out fires, for rescuing people. As the housing stock gets older, and I look to Shaney's neighborhood in particular, as those houses get older and older and older and get fewer and fewer renovations and safety measures put to them as the electrical systems get less and less effective, and there's more of an opportunity for fire and more of an opportunity for loss of life. And having been a fireman for 10 years, you're sort of preaching to the choir to me when you ask about, can we fund? We need to fund. You know, it would be much more comfortable if we could fund by grant. It would be very comfortable and very appropriate if we could fund by the fire service agreement. Essentially, you know, the county owes us money. We provide a service to the county, and we should get our due payment for that. But failing those things, it is still our responsibility to keep up with the staffing that we need to provide the safety for our citizens. And if it, you know, I tend to agree with Mr. Shields that Mr. Stevenson, could you pass that along to the mayor and see what we can do to wiggle the money out without having to find more as in a tax increase. Thank you. We don't want to go there.
Chief Office, I think you were reacting to the assertion that, do you want to come to the microphone and address that?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
I saw you shaking your head in the
Yeah,
back of the room.
Yeah, my only comment was based on Mr. Spee's recollection that I didn't think they were accurate, knowing that the fire chief doesn't get to make the decision on whether or not we fund it by hook or crook, to use your words. If you were asking a department, if you're asking a department leader, fire chief, police chief, whoever you're asking if they need additional resources to do their job more effectively, I think the answer is going to be always unanimously yes. So that was, I wrote it down just to make sure that I could try to recollect it.
Understood.
Well, what I recall, Chief, is that during those discussions, there was some discussion about positions being opened by attrition and other methods to fill those spots.
And we did that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry if I misunderstood your comment.
That's where I was going with
Perfect.
that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Mitchell,
Are you sure?
the floor is yours.
We heard about a lot of or some of the impacts that will come from the loss of these positions, including the loss of one person on the apparatus, well, on each apparatus. That might not sound like a lot, but in case that wasn't clear, if 4 people come to a fire on a vehicle, 2 can go in and look for somebody that's in there and then swap out for the other 2. If there are only 3, that might not happen. So that's a concern. The fiscal impacts, as I understand them, we're looking at probably an increase, and as I have calculated looking back at previous budgets and financial statements and that, we're looking at probably an increase of about $140,000 for this fiscal year, so for 6 months in overtime, to cover those sick days, vacation days, and all the other things. An additional up to $135,000 for unemployment insurance. That's assuming that none of the laid off personnel find other positions for the full 26 weeks. So that has an assumption built in. But right there, you've got $275,000. That, I believe, is enough to get us from now until the grant award period at the farthest reaches of the estimate. I spoke with FEMA today. They estimated that the grant would be posted, and I'll quote, in the winter of 2015. She clarified further by saying January or February. 30-day review period after that, or 30-day application period, 30-day review period after that. So we're still looking at about April, probably by the end of April. Potentially May. But in the worst case scenario, if we were to fund the remainder of the year for those positions, I believe the number was about $350,000. We funded, through tax increase, public safety last year. Additional 10 officers in the police department. Those were not all able to be hired at once. They have a new group starting at the academy in January. I feel very strongly that that money should only be used for public safety personnel. And if the police department can't use it, can't use all of it, if there's extra, then I think that we could certainly use that in the fire department to help bridge that gap as well. So that's another option. Crew safety. There was some increase in response times, and that's the safety to you and I that are at risk and at the mercy of your service from the fire department and the EMS. But that was not the big increase. The really great improvements were the ability to assemble the first alarm response units on scene, to have enough people to do that 2 in, 2 out, as is recommended. The EMS response times improved. But the other pretty significant increase was keeping the fire to the room of origin. So you may lose one room, but not your entire house. That would be pretty important to me if I had a fire, and knock on wood, I've never had that. And then the safety of our officers, the injuries on scene dropped, is my understanding, during the safety grant period. Our population growth has not, our staffing levels have not kept up with our population growth in the fire department as in the police department. We addressed that with the police department. We have not yet addressed that with the fire department because we had that cushion of the SAFER grant. What we didn't do when we got the COPS grants a few years ago, we started putting money away to be able to cushion that blow when the grant ran out to keep those police officers. We didn't do that with the SAFER grant. A mistake, obviously, and you know, there was some discussion of it's a grant, it was always a grant, when the grant's gone, it's gone, that's it. My recollection of that discussion, and it was a quite an in-depth, heated debate, as I recall, for many, many weeks, was that we took the SAFER grant to basically try it before you buy it. It was to see what would happen with those 12 extra staff members in our increased population, what we could do with our response times, what it did for firefighter safety, what it did for EMS response. And if you look, I believe you even see that there has been an increase in the EMS billing because they have been able to run those 4th and 5th call runs instead of calling in mutual aid and someone else doing that. But it's really a public safety issue. It's not about the money, and it's being made about the money. It's been made about politics, and that to me is appalling as well. We didn't hold the staffing levels for the police hostage for the tax differential, and I don't think that we should hold the staffing levels for adequate service and safety in the fire department hostage over the fire service agreement. I believe we have the funding in the current budget to retain those 10 remaining firefighters, because we already hired 2 on, so there's 10 remaining throughout the rest of this budget year, regardless of whether we get the SAFER grant or not renewed. As Ms. Shields said, I think that's our obligation. Our #1 job is public safety, and that's not just police, it's not just fire, it's a whole lot of things. It includes neighborhood services, it includes public works and making sure that our infrastructure is going to work and the roads aren't going to cave in. It's a whole lot of things, but first and foremost, when people think public safety, they think, if my house is on fire, I want the fire department there. If I can't breathe, I want the EMS there. And if somebody's breaking in, I want the police there. And that's our job. And I believe that's the mayor's job, and I will echo Ms. Shields' call.
Okay, so, you know, I see what's being asked of the fire department, and you're being asked to do more with less, and we all are. I look at my unit training. Our training dollars are cut. Our personnel dollars are cut. We don't even have enough hours allotted to us through pay to meet our annual requirements. So we can't even, our readiness levels are being affected. You know, our ability to respond to conflict is being affected, which I understand is the same thing that is going on here. I also want to clarify that this is kind of a highly unusual discussion, because this is council discussing something, but you know, directly responding to Mr. Colgrove, you know, we can't forward a budget amendment because we want to. It has to come from the mayor. And this is also not to blame him or anyone, because I do think there's an argument for fiscal prudence regarding a grant running out and not depending on operating grant, and I think that's the mayor's position. That's where he's coming from. I just disagree. And I disagree because I think, the real bottom line here is the fact that, yes, the citizens of Salisbury have paid for our fire service twice. We pay for it multiple times over because we're paying for it for people who aren't paying for it. We're paying for it for people who are outside. But that's not, that doesn't change the nature of this conversation necessarily. In fact, I think it's pretty short-sighted to connect the fire service agreement to the SAFER grant, because the county owes us that money no matter what. With or without SAFER employees, the county owes us that money. The taxpayers outside of the city who receive that service, who are having it subsidized by the people who are taxpayers in the city, they're getting a service for nothing. And that doesn't happen in this day and age. And you're right, it's time we do something about that, and we are doing something about that. Council agreed to send this letter with the mayor. I'm excited about that. It's about time. I'm looking forward to that. The SAFER grant option, which got us here, which helped us for a while, gets us into kind of an operational grant fallacy of, okay, we're hoping somebody gives us this money every couple of years. So I would recommend in the future that we not depend on operational grants, but we use capital grants wherever we can. We get that money from the federal government. We're all paying federal taxes. We're all paying state taxes. That we get those dollars whenever we can. But the operating grant puts us in this situation, and none of us like that we're in this situation. I don't like that we're in this situation. I wasn't here when we had this conversation 2 years ago, but I can tell you, I probably would have been for bringing in dollars to get us firefighters. But looking back, I hate that we're dependent upon that operating grant. And I do think one of the lessons, and I do think there are a couple lessons that we can look at, is that we do need to put money away anytime we do go ahead and depend on an operating grant. When I look at the impact, I'm not impressed by the response time improvement or anything. It's not about the response times, but I do agree that hearing that we are able to operate, according to our SOPs, the way we're supposed to, our firefighters are able to staff the trucks the way that we're supposed to, according to the national standards and the state standards that are put out. That, to me, says, okay, we're meeting the minimum level of service that we're supposed to provide. And as someone who's not an expert in firefighting, it says to me, okay, that's a good indicator, good measure that we're doing what we're supposed to do. So that's a measure that I am impressed by, and I see that we got there through this grant. The impact on our citizens, fire insurance issues, that makes a lot of sense to me. I understand that. The revenue lost and the impact to our economy, I think, is all compelling. The bottom line to me, and I'm going to join all of my council colleagues, and I'll share a message from Mr. Heath as well. The bottom line to me is that the cost of unemployment insurance and overtime comes to $275,000 versus we have two options. We have not only a budget amendment option, which I would I would ask that the mayor consider, but we also have another option, which is looking back at just the 18 months I've been here, through two budgets, the fire department has returned about $250,000 each year, which would not require any act of council. Council doesn't have to get involved. That's totally an administrative move. But that's something that the mayor could consider as well, is authorizing the fire department to simply use that money that it's likely to return at the end of the year anyway to fund these positions until April or until the end of the year. So we don't need a budget amendment. I think we've got that alternative, and I really don't want to sit here and have the conversation in a few months when a budget amendment comes forward to cover overtime and unemployment insurance, and we were without those 11 or 12 firefighters. I'd much rather take some proactive action today. I join my colleagues and Mr. Heath as well, who has said as long as it's money that is dedicated for public safety, so the money that was budgeted for the police department, the additional officers, as long as it comes from that or from within the fire department, he's supportive, not from any other source or surplus in general, other than that. So I join my council colleagues in asking that the administration consider finding a way to alleviate this issue in the short term. And it's obviously a short-term fix. But that's the request. You know, I joined in that request. I'm not sure what more we can do at this time, but I think we've made our message clear.
I will certainly take that message back to the mayor. There are options on the table. I would remind the council that if we're not successful and we don't get the award, then if we fund this through April or through the end of the year, whatever the case may be, we're still going to be looking at these same costs in terms of unemployment and overtime and all of those things. So
but I would say that the conversation's a little different. And the conversation's a little different at that time for two reasons. One, we're at the end of a budget year. Two, we have an opportunity in writing the FY16 budget to begin to draw down on the issue and begin to address the issue by adding staffing, you know, even at an incremental rate. So we have an opportunity to do something about it in the meantime. You're absolutely right. I understand that, but there's something that can be done.
Message from council is very clear, and I will communicate that to the mayor.
I have to say, I agree with you on that, because when Aaron comes here every year and year out, why do we have to see him every year and year out and not fulfill his requests?
Asking the same question, not that we don't want to see.
No, we want to see him.
She likes you. Come on.
But I'm saying the same thing, staffing. So we should be getting tired of hearing about that. And I think we're going to have an opportunity to hash that out, because thank God we're having a goal-setting session, and we can discuss some of this stuff at our goal-setting session. And I think that we should be finding ways to permanently fix this problem and not have you come back over and over and over again. Come back for something else.
Thank you.
Just come and say thank you.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to thank you all for coming and sharing your thoughts and your perspectives. It's helpful to hear it from all levels of the department to understand the challenge, understand the issues. You know, I hope you understand that, at least from my perspective, not only council wants to do something about it, but I'm sure the mayor does as well. And we just have different approaches at this point. But with any luck, we'll have some sort of communication back in the near future.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. Moving on to our next agenda item, headquarters live capacity fee waiver. Ms. Pollock, can we get you a better chair?
Yes.
And Mr. Bowles, can we get them both better
No, he
chairs?
can stand.
Yes,
Kim's
such a
getting
tall
chairs.
back, but that's okay.
Getting the
There's
chairs.
supposed to be a couple short of them somewhere. It's okay. It's okay. It works.
Yeah, take this.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, thank you.
Good night.
Hello. How are you? Welcome.
Thank you for waiting.
Okay. Our first item tonight is a capacity fee waiver request for the headquarters live building, which is at 115 South Division Street and is the old downtown fire station. We do have a representative of the applicant here. Chris Gilkerson's here if you have any questions for him.
Okay.
So this stems from the EDU incentive area legislation that was passed in September of 2013. And at that time, 300 EDUs were set aside for potentially projects like this one in the downtown area, the central business zoning district or enterprise zones for EDU waivers. To date, we've had one waiver, which was for 6 EDUs. So out of the original 300, we have 294 still available. If you'll recall, this ordinance was good for a period of 5 years, at which time it would be reevaluated after that. So we're still well within the window of time. So the headquarters live building is requesting a waiver of 5 EDUs. We have reviewed their calculations to get to that, and we do agree with that amount. We will also monitor their actual water use, and if it becomes less than that, then we'll have those other EDUs to be able to reallocate in the future. The EDU waiver would be valid for a period of 2 years. Of course, the project is moving forward already without this, so I don't have any concerns that the project would go dormant and not use the EDUs.
Have we done any evaluation of the first EDU waiver recipient to see if their levels match?
We haven't had enough time with their operations. You want to get a couple quarters. Actually, a whole year would be excellent.
Okay.
Because seasonal variations
Yeah, I
between
think
customers.
he's only been open 5-6 months.
Right, less than a year. Okay.
But we will.
Yeah. We also note that the fire company, or the fire building never had a meter.
Yeah, that was
So
one
we
of
were
my
aiming anything
questions.
relate over any other use.
Okay.
So
Have we,
we'll send a bill to the fire company.
has
for
that
any
been done?
measures.
Has the meter been put in?
The meter's either been put in, or, yeah, it has been.
It's been put in, okay. That was on my list of questions there.
Great. Okay. Other questions? All right. Hearing none. Is there a consensus to bring this to legislative session?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Consent agenda.
Yes.
Consent agenda, yes.
Consent agenda.
Thank you.
Excellent. Congratulations. Thank you. Okay. Next item on our agenda is the Riverwalk repair and maintenance update.
You want to do that, or you want to do Wayne's?
No, Wayne Street. I skipped Wayne Street, pardon me. Wayne Street parking modification request from Salisbury University, yes. Mr. Sheehan, do you want to join, or are you okay back there? Or?
Actually,
You
everyone
wanna-
here is
yeah,
from Wayne
that's
Street.
right. Yeah, okay. It's all,
Bring up all the chairs.
no, if you don't mind, we'll just talk through, Mike in a minute.
Well, but
Yeah.
she'd be able to get that on tape if,
If
they have
we
to
need
speak.
anyone to comment, we'll just ask you to come to the podium.
Okay, we received a request from Salisbury University to have some parking modifications on Wayne Street and Power Street. As you know, Wayne Street and Power Street are city streets, so any parking modification has to come through the city and be changed via ordinance. So this is as part of the new stadium project, and the university is requesting to remove 31 spaces on Wayne Street, 9 spaces on Wayne Street south of Power Street. An additional 3 bus parking spaces would be removed. And on Power Street, 2 vehicle spaces would be removed for a total of 42 vehicle spaces and 3 bus spaces. They would be adding back 2 new spaces on Power Street for vehicles, 2 new bus spaces on Wayne Street, and a bus loading and unloading zone which would accommodate up to 4 buses. So in total, we'll have 2 permanent vehicle spaces and 2 bus spaces added back. The last time we did some modifications on Wayne Street were in February of 2013, where we eliminated vehicle parking to add bus spaces. So this is, continuation of that, as we will probably see as the master plan of the university takes place and all their athletic complex changes. I would presume that they would be coming back with future changes as well.
When we sat down with the university, when they were talking about their plans for the stadium, one of the things they were also looking at was a speed table and the bump out arrangements that they have with that. One of the things we wanted to throw on the table was that the university has the property on both sides of Wayne Street, between Bateman and Power. The concept there would be an opportunity maybe for the city to abandon that stretch and let it be part of the university because of all the activities with the stadium spilling out as it gets out through there. They're going to have a wider sidewalk and everything. But we would retain the water and sewer utility easements for our service. But it might not be an opportunity there to give them more flexibility in how they do the designs rather than being restricted by the city street in that portion.
Okay.
Power would still connect with the other part of Wayne that loops around, and of course Bateman is a straight through. But we wanted to explore that idea in terms of giving more workable options for Salisbury University. It avoids us getting into speed tables and speed bump growth, and again, opens options. I know one of the things I saw was they had the rendering of the stadium in the paper and all the people milling out there. I had a hard time deciding where the street started and where it ended as a result of that. But having been a couple football games up in Penn State. You get those crowds coming out, and you've got a good victory going on.
Well, this will be like Happy Valley one day.
Exactly.
Has that option been discussed with the university yet?
We've thrown that out to them. One of the concerns that was initially mentioned was the difficulty that they have in terms of acquiring property through the state system. There's a lot of steps they have to go through. What we came back and said, by us abandoning the street, it would automatically revert to the property owners on both sides, i.e. Salisbury University.
Okay.
So we could actually shorten that whole process for them. In other words, it just becomes theirs, as opposed to having to go through an
Acquire.
acceptance of property. Exactly. So it wouldn't, in my mind, affect their plans for how they want to do that, and again, ultimately give them more options in terms of how they want to handle the street. Because I can see with the growth of the athletic fields in there, there's a lot of opportunities for other events that are going to occur, and road closures that we have to deal with, and all those kind of things. It would really put that control back in their balls, how they want to do it.
On the East Campus portion, and maybe this question is for you all at Salisbury University, on the East Campus side, are there any other city streets, or how many other city streets would remain cutting up the sort of East Campus property? I mean, I guess Bateman and Howard, Jeff?
If you saw Bateman, there's still
Power
portions of Wayne
Portions of Wayne would
and
still.
Power.
And portions of power.
Portions of Power, portions of Wayne.
But you
And
wouldn't be able to
Milford
make that.
portions.
And portions of Milford, okay. Oh, right, because they have the UP complex.
And I
Okay.
guess truly a piece of South Division.
Where
Oh, right,
because
yeah,
they've acquired
sure.
on the other side there.
Okay.
What part of subdivision?
Wayne, Bateman.
We've got some crossover up in here now.
Where their facilities buildings located.
Yeah, I know what that is.
It's a small
They can
part.
take that.
Over time, as a strategy, does the university have any thoughts as to whether or not it would be beneficial to have that as sort of campus property or campus streets rather than it being city streets that cut through campus?
You're talking about Wayne specifically or other?
Over time, as a strategy for all of the streets on East Campus. Wayne, we can get back to Wayne specifically, but just for right now, thinking globally.
I think it's an idea we would like to entertain and discuss. Obviously, if we own those streets, it gives us much more flexibility with where the new field house might be located or things of that nature. We haven't had official conversations about it, but working with our master planners in 2005, 2009, 2014, they're all kind of saying the same thing. Gee, if you had more control of these streets, you'd have much more flexibility and many more options.
Okay.
We never specifically approached the city about that, but we have informally discussed it.
Okay.
I have to see what you're talking about. Because I'm thinking about people going to the doctor's office.
Yes.
And we already had that problem with Only Road, that little road, that road. And that would, what I would be concerned about. But if the other streets, I don't have a problem with this, what you're saying today. But like if we, in the future, South Division Street, because I frequent South Division Street, going to doctor's office on Milford Street. And a lot of senior citizens do not like going to 13. They use Milford Street. So we have to consider, I'd have to consider that. And when you close Bateman Street, see, that was another, fiasco,
Well, Milford's a little bit different because there's also private property.
Yes.
We wouldn't have that
Yeah,
Along.
option.
but you wouldn't take Milford, but I'm saying if they took South Division, you're part of South Division. You were saying where the facilities building is.
Well,
I think that's also an unlikely one, given that it's
Yeah.
the only thing they have
Yeah.
on
See,
the.
that's the, yeah, so whatever streets don't hinder.
I'm really thinking about
Oldies
Wayne
like me,
and
I-
Bateman and maybe part of Power.
And possibly Avery.
And possibly Avery, okay.
Okay, see, I have division.
that makes sense.
But I would agree, Milford and South Division have too much private.
Yeah.
well, there's quite a bit on Power. Well, there's my doctor, for one, I was there today, and so I was looking with an eye towards this. And you've either got to try to get back out on South Division and turn left, forget it, it's not happening, or come back out Power Street and take Wayne over to Bateman to get back to the highway. You could go out to Milford Street, but that's often just as, almost as challenging as turning left on North Division. So that is an easy way out, even though we have that one way on Bateman. Getting out of there is still easy. I'm concerned that if we were to abandon Wayne Street, we'd have to, because they could, assume worst-case scenario that that is no longer a street and is impassable, and then where do we go? You know, how do you get out of there unless we're looking at a light? Then we're going to have traffic issues, I think, traffic flow issues on Division and on possibly on Milford. The other thing is when you come out and you go on either Division or Milford, and you get back to 113 or to 13, you can't go left. The only way you can head south on 13 is by going down Wayne Street and coming out on Bateman. So then you're really creating a closed loop there. You can't get out of it easily. You're forcing traffic to go down and make U-turns to head south. So I know there was some discussion about that Milford Street being made a full intersection instead of right turn only, and that didn't work. There were a whole lot of reasons why not. I don't remember all the specifics, but I know it was not recommended by the state and they weren't willing to do it. So short of that, how are you going to go left? Or how are you going to head south from there? The other concern that I had in reading through this, one of the reasons for removing some of those parking spots on the south end of Wayne Street, south of Power Street, was to improve line of sight. And then it read a little further, and they want to make it bus parking. I don't think that's going to improve line of sight coming out of Power Street if there's a bus parked there versus 3 cars.
Well, it would improve it from what it is today, in that those 2 buses are located down the street a little bit. But really, improving line of sight was more geared towards all these cars parked at the Power Street, Wayne Street intersection, and then, you know, the flow out of the stadium.
Yeah, I don't think that that is a good place for, it is a problem, line of sight is a problem coming out of there, but I don't think bus parking even further back down the street because of the way that angle is, to me, doesn't seem like it would be improved at all. Probably even worsened, because you can't see around, through, or under, or over a bus. It's just there, it's like a wall, versus cars you can usually see over. I also have some hesitation. I'm not fully convinced that we should eliminate the non-paid parking all along Wayne Street, 40 spots. It's full every day, all day, every day.
Well, by students who should be
By
paying
students.
for a
I'm
parking.
sorry. Would you mind going to the podium
Yeah,
so
sorry.
we can hear you?
So,
You
what,
want to make that comment up there?
not that one, but in it.
Well, whether they should or shouldn't, if they can find free on-street parking, why should they have to pay for a parking permit?
I guess from a planning perspective, just thinking strategically, I mean, it would seem to me that one, given zoning and future land use planning, I mean, I would consider most of this, you know, to be long-term, likely to be university property, with the exception of the city streets. And that's probably the only exception long-term. I see that there are a couple small medical office buildings in the near, you know, for the next few years. But I also, you know, don't think the university would make any attempt to restrict access to city streets, which they couldn't do anyway, where there were other property owners facing those streets. So I wouldn't think.
I was talking about Wayne, just for
Oh,
clarification.
yeah.
I was talking about Wayne.
Oh, no,
If
I'm
we
going
abandon
back
it,
to
give
the
it
other,
them.
I'm going back to the
Okay.
Milford, yeah, I know, or at the Power Street point. Regarding Wayne, I mean, again, I look at that as kind of the backbone of East Campus when you look at the plans here. You look at it as kind of the spine, which is restrictive. I mean, it's also kind of nicely situated given what's to the south and what's to the north in terms of the dimensions of fields, the athletic fields. But I'm sure there's some rearrangement that I can't predict that would make a lot of sense. One of which could be the field house and how that would be situated. I don't know exactly what the plans are for that, and maybe they don't exist in much detail yet.
They're on the master plan.
They're on the master plan.
Not funded.
Not funded, but on the master plan. But But, it looks, to me, it would make sense. I mean, one, I wish Bateman were not a one-way street, but given that it is, I mean, I can see that circulation, if this was intended to be mostly a public use street and public area, I would understand wanting to keep these open, but or keep them open to on-street parking to the public, free, et cetera. But it seems to me that it would be logical to let that spine be developed as part of the planning process for campus, and not a one sort of kind of island of city property within, for city maintenance, et cetera, within the field of Salisbury University property. I just don't know what we gain by that.
Most of the cars are students, university students. I never park on Wayne Street when I go to NAB Center, so you're all using it anyway. I have no reason to I don't even travel that unless I'm going to something that's affiliated with, like PAC 14 or NAB Center, or that's it. Or when I'm called to go to, and I don't even have to do that now because behind the radio station's behind, where I'm talking about NAB Center and stuff. So
Can I ask, and maybe can somebody come to the microphone and answer, if the city were to abandon the right-of-way or to abandon our street, would the university resist that process? Don't give a politician's answer. Come on. I'm just warning you in advance.
For the record, Robbie Sheehan, I serve as Deputy Chief of Staff at Salisbury University. Regarding your question, Council President, it's something we absolutely would consider accepting if you decided to abandon the property. No, we're not going to resist the process, but we certainly would want to have more conversation to understand the implications long-term.
Okay.
At a much higher level than us sitting here tonight.
I don't think anyone on council would want to enact that process if it wasn't something that the university was supportive of.
But we obviously would like to be have a conversation. Certainly.
Okay. So at this point in time, given that there's a request and that there's an alternative option, can we bring this back to council, allowing you time to have further discussions with the university, or would you like more direction from council?
Can I ask a question of Robbie?
Sure.
I think their timing is critical with the stadium project, and maybe Robbie or Jeff could speak to that so that we know how much time we have to talk.
Yeah, sure. What's the timetable look like?
We're late.
We're late? Okay.
Well, we would like to start the stadium project. We need a Board of Public Works approval in their early January meeting.
Yeah.
So we would like
So what are you doing tomorrow? Can we get together?
Really, what's critical for us is allowing us to reduce those parking spaces and shift the buses from in front of the stadium to south.
Yeah, I think that's the priority right now. I mean, so.
I'm not in favor of it.
You're not in favor of it?
I don't have a problem with it.
I think there are students who can't afford $90 or $100 a year, or a semester, well, it's a year, right?
It's a year.
To park.
Yep.
And if they're not if they can't find free parking on the street, they're gonna be parking in businesses, and they're gonna be towed, and we're gonna have that issue to deal with. They already try to get away with it, and I think that, this is a public street with public parking, and I haven't been convinced what the benefit is, how that benefits SU and the stadium project at all.
You might, Jeff, can you come up here and speak into the microphone?
Jeff Downs, Director of Salisbury University's Capital Projects, Facilities Planning. Their students are always looking for a free place to park, whether it's Wayne Street or behind Cookout or the railroad tracks, or they're always looking for a free place to park. But for us, this is really about a $19 million stadium and creating a new hub on the East Campus. And part of me would like to be able to close that section of Wayne Street on game day, for example, or tournament weekends to allow free flow of pedestrians. You can't have that free flow with cars bumper to bumper on both sides of that street. So we're really just talking about a section of Wayne Street, you know, in proximity to that stadium. You know, the 40 students who would lose a free parking space, I would not tend to dwell on those 40 students. I would look at the 8,500 students who are gaining a $19 million stadium and a much more active and useful and safer area. I mean, those are my thoughts and my opinions anyway. But I would not like to look at this from a perspective of 40 lost permits or 40 lost free spaces. It's a new hub to our East Campus. It's a new $19 million stadium, and we just see lots of people activity. And those cars parked on the east and west sides of Wayne really restrict that free flow.
Right.
Why can't we close the street on game day or for events?
Well, even
Most of those are students that clear out pretty much daily.
well, if we could task our university police to find them 1 or 2 days in advance, because many of them live on campus and their cars are there 3 days at a time without moving. I mean, I'm not saying that's an impossibility, but if we took ownership, as Mike and Amanda had discussed earlier, at some future point, you know, we probably would close. First thing we would do is remove those spaces from in front of the stadium. I mean, we would remove them. But then the second thing might be on game day, we would close down that section, you know, on the west side of the street as well.
Chad, just a question from, regarding design, just so I understand, and Mike kind of implied that he had the same question. Is there a surface treatment that changes and goes into the current roadway, like brick pavers or something? Is that what's implied in the drawings?
Working with public service, they have allowed us to bump out the curb into the street a little bit. There's still very generous 2-lane traffic, et cetera, but it gives a greater enhancement in the front of the stadium, greater pedestrian areas, queuing areas, stadium ticket sales, et cetera. Okay. So yes, we have bumped out, I think, 6 or 8 feet into the street.
Would striping shift to the south as well? I mean, would it move the center line? Would the center line
No, the
stay
center
where it
line
is?
stayed the same
Center
because
line
right now
stay
there's
where it is.
parking on both sides.
So it would essentially
take
be
up
in the parking space.
the parking lane.
Right.
Yes, we still have 2, if this goes through. I mean, obviously that won't happen if there's still parking in that area.
Right.
That can only happen if parking's eliminated. There would still be 2 12-foot wide travel lanes and an 8-foot wide parking lane on the west side.
So there would be an 8-foot wide parking lane still.
On the west side, but there would be no parking right in front of the stadium, but the reason the center line doesn't jog is
Oh, I said
on
north
either
and-
side, there's
Yeah,
still parking.
okay, I said north-south, I meant west, you're right.
And so obviously we couldn't bump out and create greater pedestrian space in front of the stadium if we didn't remove at least X number of parking spaces on the east side of Wayne Street in front of the stadium.
So you're only removing the parking on one side of the street?
No,
This plan?
it's proposed to be removed on both,
Yeah.
right in front of the stadium.
front of the stadium.
That's what I was,
Yeah.
how I read it, okay. And I do appreciate that the investment in the stadium and the needs of that. There are other events that are held there, fireworks and other things that, that parking is often used. Well, that street is closed for those events. And I don't, you know, it's used all the other times, but we close it down for those events. So I don't understand, as conditions exist now with the parking and with the city owning the street, why that street can't be closed for big events, for games and that kind of thing. I understand the bump outs, the additional queuing and that for the lines, but.
And I think, Ms. Mitchell, it probably could. That's kind of a separate, I mean, there's maybe 2 things going on here. I mean, we could work with the city and perhaps close the city street on game days or tournament weekends or things like that. But this is really kind of back to the design of the new stadium and freeing up that portion of the street in front of the new stadium, making it a much safer and friendly pedestrian place.
Yeah, I guess for me, just working backwards from the proposed plan of the new stadium, forgetting for a moment existing conditions and working back to existing conditions, I wouldn't design parking on the west side of the street either. I wouldn't want parking on the west side of the street. So I have no problem with it. And I think personally the way to get there, from what I'm hearing, is the abandonment of the road, of the right-of-way, which would give you the greatest flexibility. But I realize that would also require some conversations, and I realize time is of the essence as well. So if that's not achievable in a relatively quick fashion, and I don't know what would prevent it from being achievable in a quick fashion, but if that's not achievable in a quick fashion, then we could certainly do it another way.
Yeah, if there was a decision to move ahead with a closure, we would be able to prepare the documents, because we did another closure before. So our surveyor could come up with a deed description, Mark would have his review of that, and we could have an ordinance prepared for the closure.
Okay. And that could be
by that January deadline, though. Can you get there? Because that's a recommendation you would want to make to the Board of Public Works if
Correct.
that's
The January would be the beginning of demolition, but obviously by the time we were ready to do new construction and perhaps bump the street out, it would be next fall.
Yeah. I mean, even with the parking ordinance we'd have to go through, we'd probably be hard pressed even just to do that for January anyway.
So either one may take us, 60 days.
Yeah. I mean, you have
45 days.
Basically what this was, we have looked at it. This was an opportunity to have that discussion, decide if there was an interest in doing that.
Well, it sounds like there is, and that can be discussed, between Public Works and the university. It sounds like there's enough interest in that, for that conversation to go forward. Given that we've got limited time, 45 days until that meeting, the BPW meeting, I don't know when it is. When is it?
At best.
At best. I don't know when the Board of Public Works meets.
January 7th.
Oh, okay. So, 35 days maybe.
But what, if we weren't allowed to remove those 42 spaces, we would still go through, with a contract with Whiting Turner, our construction company, and begin the demolition work. It just means that we'd have to redesign, whereas we can't bump out into the street if the city doesn't allow us to remove those spaces.
Right. So I think given that either path is going to take probably every bit of that time, I think we should pursue the most favorable path, the preferred path. So.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
When you had the designs done, you didn't have, those parking spaces existed, and we haven't had this conversation. Don't you have a set of plans already? Didn't you do one with and one without?
No, that's not how design and
No,
planning works.
time doesn't afford that. I mean, we worked with the City Public Works, and we didn't meet with resistance or opposition, but we fully embraced the fact that you would have to approve or disapprove that process.
Just curious.
And if it's disapproved, then we have to go back to the drawing board.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, I think if you can work with Mr. Downs and Mr. Sheehan to develop whichever path of those two paths is preferred and is easiest. If the university's comfortable, I'd prefer to see the abandonment of the road. Is that the preferred consensus of council?
No.
No? Okay. So that would be the preferred consensus of council.
It gives us the guidance so we can proceed.
And if, at whatever rapid rate that we can get that back to council,
Well,
we'll see it.
I would also want to see what the alternative plan is for getting southbound on 13 without rights to Wayne Street. Because if we abandon that, even during construction, that street's going to be closed off. They're going to close it down and use that area for construction. So how's that going to work?
How do you go southbound where?
On 13. Because if you're on Power Street, your options are Division and Milford, if Wayne Street's
You
not
go down,
open.
I do it all the time. I go down to Milford. Here's how I do it. I'll tell you how to do it.
Without
You go
making
down
a
South
U-turn.
Division Street, you turn down Honeysuckle and hit 13 South.
And
I
you can
mean,
also
know,
go up
and then
to
you go all the way down
College.
to a South Division and go like you go to Walmart, make a right and go up.
Going through Fruitland.
Yeah, going to Fruitland. I do it every time, all the time. You know why I do it? Because I beat I have the traffic lights. I don't have the traffic lights.
I'm just thinking about all the, I'm hearing all the voices that
But
we
see,
heard when we had the only road
the
discussion in my
yeah, I
head.
know.
How do we get out of here? How do we
But the
get out of here?
students don't, the students are the one that uses that street. It's the students, because when I go in there, that's all you see is students. Salisbury University students. And when they walk across you, you know, when they're getting out of the cars and running across the street, and you're afraid to hit them or something, you know, so let them have the street.
I think there are two important questions, and one is, recognizing that the only landowner on either side is the university, and so that's how this works out the way it does. But at the same time, there has been an investment over time of city taxpayers into the infrastructure on that street. So there is, something that we've given to for a long time there. So there's an appreciation not only for trafficability, but for the investment. And I think about that in terms of the streetscape improvements in time that I would, hope come to this and other streets. But I'd also rather, given that the landowner on both sides is the university, that the university take over those costs and not the city, especially knowing the quality of the streetscape standards that the university is looking at, which are, very high quality, and I know that we're collaborating and coordinating and making sure that our streetscape standards and theirs work together. So I think at the end of the day, them having control over that provides for more than likely better treatment in the future, and a more favorable product for the Salisbury taxpayer, the average Salisbury taxpayer.
Thank you.
So you'll come back to us with a recommendation that you and the university are both comfortable with?
Yep, we'll follow up with the university and pull together some of the paperwork for that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Could
Thank you all.
Could
Yes.
I ask, I'm sorry, but just, I guess, using Councilwoman Shields' term, if I could pretend for a minute that, so we're moving forward with the potential of abandoning the street and the university taking ownership, so we have to go back and discuss this with the exec staff, et cetera, but there's still a couple other minor questions, and that's the 2 spaces on power that we've asked to be deleted so we can have access into that little parking segment, and then the 2 buses to the south. And the reason they're exactly where they are is because they're directly across the street to the access component of the soccer fields. So our visiting teams go directly into those soccer fields through the concession stand, through the ticket gate. And I'm hoping, is that possible to get approval? I'm not sure if that's appropriate to ask.
Mr. Tillman, would that have to be a separate ordinance, so it wouldn't be related to the abandonment? Okay, could it just be done in parallel, those two?
Yeah,
Certainly could, yeah.
Same time frame in parallel? I don't think we can do it any faster.
I understand.
We didn't want to make it easy for the visiting team anyway.
Right, of course. Go Seagulls. Right. Okay, anything else? Okay, well, thank you all for coming and spending so much time with us. We appreciate it this evening.
Thank you.
I'm sorry,
Thank
I
you.
had to step out to check on my grandson. What was the decision on the bus parking?
That would have to be a separate ordinance.
Okay,
So they're going to be working on that simultaneously.
okay. But you want to eliminate the car parking spots and allow buses to park on that south end of Power Street?
That's the request.
Wayne Street?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
I am not
Thank you
in
all.
agreement with that at all.
Okay.
As well. Just to be clear.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
All right, next item on our agenda is the Riverwalk repair and maintenance update.
Yes, we wanted to give you an update on the progress for that project. If you recall in the memo, we provided some background. The project's been broken into 2 phases. The first phase is completed, and that was replacement of the outfall pipes that came through the wall of the bulkhead, as well as installing weep holes in the bulkhead to relieve water pressure.
Wow.
One of the biggest problems we've had with the damage, the wear and tear to the Riverwalk was the loss of soil behind the bulkhead through the corroded areas where the pipes had worn out, as well as the water pressure that built back behind it that force the wall out, and then we have the subsidence that go up the walkway. So that part of the project is complete. The second phase is the stabilization of the bulkhead and replacement of the concrete surface that'll be necessitated by having to stabilize that bulkhead. So there was a little sketch that was in your packets that showed the areas, and I think that was in the packet, wasn't it?
It wasn't on the
Or did
online.
you have the small one? Okay. We have the
We
large.
didn't have anything in the packet for this.
Okay. There is, along the stretch, this is just the existing Riverwalk that we has, will be stabilized by the installation of screw anchors. It will go through the wall, and then they'll screw back into the subsoil, and that'll hold as a retaining wall for that bulkhead. And that has to be done all along that section of it.
Which section is that?
The whole, basically the whole section.
Essentially everything existing.
Yeah, there's one small exception, just below, I get my bearings, Circle?
The South Division.
South Division. On the one side, there's where we don't have to put any modifications. And we're proposing to redo the sidewalk in that area. So you can see these are just two examples here. You can see of the two sections, little squares that showed where the outfall pipes were placed. And we took out that sidewalk, and you have the stone that's there now.
Did you say replaced or replaced?
Replaced.
Replaced.
Yeah, the pipes were replaced there. Because you were losing soil through the sides of the thing where it came through the bulkhead. And then you can see all these little screw piles that are gonna go in through that the next contractor will be in. Going through that process, that sidewalk has to be taken up and will have to be replaced. So that'll be part of that next project. But that whole extent of the active river walk, from 13 down to where it ends, will be part of this stabilization project.
Which is on both sides?
With both sides. The engineer looked at different ways of trying to stabilize that, either using screw piles or what was referred to as a concrete dead man that would be put in the ground behind it, and then the anchors would stretch from that concrete dead man back through the bulkhead. But that's in there as an alternate if there's some problems with trying to get the screw anchors in because of subsoil conditions. But the idea here is to use screw piles to go through the whole thing.
It's a trenchless technology, so putting in concrete deadmen and tiebacks, you have to tear up a significant area of the ground surface. So this would all be done from the river trenchlessly. But then with that, we still need to repair the Riverwalk surface because, as you know, right now it's very uneven and there's been voids created, so we need to backfill and compact.
Where it's settled. Now, the surface that the Riverwalk is on is a washed concrete surface. In other words, they put the concrete down and then they etch it out to expose the aggregate underneath. That is a process that we can't use anymore because of environmental conditions.
We can't just wash acid
Can't
into
wash
the
it
river
into the
anymore?
river, no.
No, you really can't.
Imagine that.
So we wanted to do something, we didn't just want to have a sidewalk. So what we've looked at and challenged our designers to do was to create a concrete wood plank type design, is what we proposed. If any, you got down to Chrisfield with the Taw's Crab Feast, the dock that they have there for Smith Island is along that line. I think it, I have a picture of it, is they did that kind of treatment. Also in Ocean City, part of the boardwalk section that's concrete where the trolleys are, they've done the same kind of treatment. So these are just some pictures that we would give it what it would look like. So it's going to give a boardwalk type of image.
But it's concrete.
It's concrete.
Is there a,
It's nice.
is there a dye used, or
Yep.
what, how does it?
They would do a dye into the concrete. They recommend using a gray dye, so it would be a weathered wood. It's also a lot more resistant to UV as opposed to the darker type stains over a period of time. The patterns that would be used to stamp into the concrete, once they're done with those, we would take possession of those patterns, so if we were to have to do any repairs, we can reuse those patterns.
So the scoring also makes it look like there's planks? I mean, it looks
Yep.
like it's
Exactly.
actually wood, and is it wood dimensions? Is it like 12 inches or 8 inches or 6 inches?
It'll probably follow
Something
a
like
very
that.
realistic pattern
Okay.
in terms of that. And the planks would run perpendicular to the path.
Okay.
So like a traditional.
It's probably more
would do.
attractive, isn't it?
Plus, it's easier with the patterns. If you ever tried to lay flooring and have it
Yeah.
moving as this way, it has a shorter starting and ending in terms of that.
And one of the
Smaller
questions,
puzzle pieces work better, yeah.
Exactly.
one of the questions I had is curves. How do we have some curved parts of the?
Yeah, they have different patterns.
So couldn't vinegar.
As they adjust the pattern, they can adapt that a little bit of that. So that's what we do. I think it'll look really nice in terms of it. It is just redoing what we've got. We're not extending anything yet. That'll be future phases.
But is it redoing 100% of the surface of what we've got?
Yes, even the section that does not need the screw anchors, we were proposing to redo that surface as well, because it was only gonna be a small section
Sure.
with the old surface. And
So the part that says no modifications right there?
that
We'll
part
get a new
is
surface
in
on
the
it.
bid as a surface only, yes.
So-
And I guess I will mention, we do have the bond money for this project ready for us, so.
Wow.
Good.
We have about $1.9 million of bonds ready for this.
Now, we don't need a MDE permit because they're treating this as maintenance. We got to deal with critical areas, so we're working through planning and zoning on getting that approval. And then we will need an erosion sediment control plan, which again, through the sub-district. One of the things we're working, in addition to those two things, we're working with the solicitor's office. We need to get some approvals for the screw anchors. It's hard to see at that scale, but some of those screw anchors will actually go under some of the building foundations. So we need to get permission from the property owners. They'll never see it, they'll never notice it, but because we're going through that property line thing, the advice was to obtain that. And that'll help in the future if we have to do any other maintenance on it too. Okay.
The screw anchors, are they under the surface?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So they,
It's you're drilling underground.
will the cap or the end of the screw anchor be exposed to the water?
There's a plate that goes on
Okay.
over it, so it's not the actual anchor. There's like a plate welded to it.
Okay.
That goes on the face of the bulkhead.
Is it a metal, is it a steel anchor?
Yeah, you'll still
Yes.
have a bolt that, seals it once you've got it into it, but the hole will be sealed up with that plate.
Does any sort of intrusion into the bulkhead weaken it or create a potential future failure point?
What they'll typically do is they're gonna have to take the concrete off. They'll be able to put the screw part of it in, they screw it onto the shaft, and then they do the drilling in, and then all that's left is the threaded section on the end that they would cap off.
Okay.
And then by putting the plate on, you're distributing that load across that.
Okay.
So that it holds that back. And you can see by the number of those screw anchors, there's quite a lot of them that distribute that load. So the nice thing is you're getting that structural support, you're relieving some of the pressure behind it by getting the water to drain out, and now you're sealing off the loss of soil that caused the subsidence in the plates.
Nice.
So really what we're doing is a structural fix out there for the money that we're investing in.
Okay.
To get it right.
And this project did start as a structural analysis. That's how we came to these recommendations, is there was a structural analysis done and geotechnical work done on the entire Riverwalk bulkhead, and then this is what stemmed from that as far as a recommendation.
With putting new surface on, given that we have existing railing, what happens to that? Does it have to be removed in order to apply the surface treatment?
Well, they'll be pulling the railing and that whole piece off. One of the interesting things when they did the original design was that the slabs overhang the bulkhead so that you're hiding the whalers and the structure underneath it and give you a nice clean view of the water. The contractor will be reusing the brace for the railing in terms to be removed and reinstalled. So the support for the railing will be there and then reconstructed on there. One of the interesting things that goes about it when you're talking about the curvature is the formwork that has to go into having that piece of slab overhang, because now you've got to form underneath it and cap it. One of the things we tried to look at when we were looking at options was whether these could be precast and try to save money, and they could time-wise put them down. But the problem is you couldn't use a standard form because everything changes as it goes. So the contractor will have some effort in terms of doing that. But you can see that overhang hides the whaler bolts and everything on that, so you can basically be able to look.
So the railing anchor system is removed and reinstalled. Is the entire railing removed and then reinstalled?
Yeah.
So
The whole thing
keeping
is,
the,
yes.
is the railing of a quality that it's going to last us for some time? Has that been analyzed in this process at all?
It's something to be evaluated as we go through it. It looked in pretty good condition in
Yeah.
terms of what we got.
I haven't looked at it closely.
I think
so
the biggest thing is
it's
where
not a
you had
loaded
the
question.
weakness with the subsidence and shifting, I think,
Yeah.
by reconstructing it. The slab is what supports the railing
Right.
system.
So right now, if you look at them, some of them are leaning, but that's really because they're attached to the slab.
Okay.
So as the slab is settling, the railing's leaning inward.
Okay.
So the recommendation was that it was in good shape and could be replaced, but we are gonna have to remove and replace it along the whole length.
Okay. Now, can we, if we needed to reconstruct pieces, could we do that and match it fairly closely? I mean,
The railing, you mean?
the railing. You know, if we found that it was failing, you know, if the actual railing was damaged beyond
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I
In
don't,
segments, you mean, certain segments, yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Could we
yeah.
match it?
I think so. I don't recall that any of the structure in the railing system was anything unique in
And,
terms of parting.
and let me add to that, and this is the real reason for my question. The railing at like Quinta, like that area, is like this anchor chain.
Yes,
uh,
yes.
Changes a little bit. And I'm just wondering, you know, we have kind of, this is sort of very Salisbury's history. We have two different types of railing on our Riverwalk, and, you know, they're both nice, but
Right.
two different types.
Right, you're right.
Maybe we,
The railing
Should
that
understand.
we're talking about, I think, is more safe than the
Yeah.
chain one.
yeah.
I think the chain one looks more nautical and
Sure.
kitschy kind of thing. So if we had to make a choice, I'd stick with the railing.
The safer railing.
It's safe.
If it was at all possible in planning, you know, maybe this is a long-term thing, but in planning to think about replacing the nautical with the safe, that might be wise, and then to find other ways to incorporate that nautical
Sure.
material, since there's a lot of it, and it's nice.
Yeah, there are uses over
wouldn't
at the
suggest
marina,
getting
for
rid of it.
example.
Perfect.
Yep.
Just something to think of. Now, there are gaps in our urban greenway, which the Riverwalk is part of, and one of the things I wanted to ask you about tonight was thoughts on a planning process for completing those gaps. In the urban greenway has been kind of shown in these big schematic brushstrokes in our comprehensive plans for 40 years, and we've never taken we haven't recently taken steps to complete it. Now, we've got before us a project to extend it, to complete a portion of it, which is great. River's Edge completes or extends a portion of it, and then the marina improvements that I know are, you know, in the works, and also the Feldman's piece, Feldman's and Patty's Brattle piece, which is all great. You know, I'm wondering if sort of those final segments, I'm wondering if we can't, because there's actually a city-owned piece of property next to Market Street that is kind of
Correct.
probably maybe the last on that side of the river anyway.
I think there was something else in there.
There's the other side of the river.
The other
There's
side.
south, yeah, there's the other side of the river on south, or on Carroll.
Well, the CIP has the urban greenway in as far as where they want to fund, you know,
Okay.
funding for that and get that going. Obviously, the things that you mentioned are the pieces that are taking us to the river itself and the connection with the marina. My problem is always that big Route 13 to go the other way was always a challenge
That
we have
is-
to do.
Yeah,
They are talking about the state highway replacing that bridge at some point.
are they really?
Supposedly designed, but
So we need
how
to
we
talk
fit
to our
that in,
friends
yeah.
at State Highway.
I don't think they've been thinking about that part of
But
it.
then there's 3 property owners who own, you know, property on the other side of it.
True.
Who we would need to talk to as well.
Yes, and it's very tight in that area.
Yes.
And the railroad too, once
Yeah.
we got past the bridge. So,
We know how friendly they are.
yeah. So the focus, I think, what we've been looking at is, you know, getting this working right. This is the foundation of how we, with the Riverwalk, and then working through that extension with all the development and the marina opportunities that we have to get that area.
Okay, excellent.
The challenges will be the other way in terms of the long-term planning.
Now, timeline on this portion?
That, once we have to get the sign-offs on the right-of-ways and everything. I think we definitely like to get this thing bid in 2015.
Okay,
It's hopefully, we shouldn't have concerns from the property owners in terms of the sign-offs.
Construction will take about 6 months once we have all the easements.
Okay. And then, sorry, I have two other questions. Two of the things that are actually on council's agenda, planning agenda, are one, Riverwalk, taking this Riverwalk standard and requiring it for Riverwalk in the future, whether or not it's private. And really this goes hand in hand with the second, which would be having a requirement that, within the city on the river, when you develop, you will meet the city's standard for Riverwalk development.
Okay.
Is that something that we could work into now that we have a standard being developed, that we could work into an ordinance, over the coming months? I mean, there's not really a rush, in riverfront development, but it's certainly something that proves to be a conversation piece when we talk about what happens at Feldman's, and if there's anything that happens at 500 Riverside, then we've got the same discussion there. And before you know it, we're talking about it in 5 places.
What about the lot 30?
And then, and lot 30.
That may put more time constraint on,
Yeah.
depending on how that goes.
The nice thing with design like this, and that we've talked about with Main Street Master Plan, those designs give us a very good specification and standard to use. And it makes it very easy to apply that and say, you shall meet that standard. And it's already there, rather than having to design that standard and build it back into it. So that's the kind of concept that we would look forward to doing, in extending that type of standard. Because it's easy to do, you just reference the guy, there it is. We look at it, and we got the drawings, and you can take it from there.
Well, with that in mind, and if there's council consensus for that, instead of it just sitting on our agenda as a future item for council discussion, could we work with Mr. Tillman's office and connect them to you to begin to develop a simple ordinance that references whatever standard it is, the standard as you specify it, and says that's the standard that shall be met.
For the future development.
Yeah, for the future development of the Riverwalk on riverfront properties in the city.
Yeah, I'm wondering, we have our own book of standards that we adopt. We just integrate
if we
that right
added that.
into it.
I guess the one thing that we would need is some sort of requirement that they meet, that they first have Riverwalk, that there's a publicly accessible Riverwalk. It would be the same as requiring sidewalks in the city.
Well, that's why, I guess what I'm getting is, we have a book of standards that we've update every once in a while, and we just did it last year. In terms of those standards, it would be concealed to me, we could just build that right into the standard.
Okay.
That's where sidewalks fall and street standards and that type of thing.
So rather than an ordinance,
It just
it could be
becomes part
done
of our public works
as part of your
standards.
public works.
Yeah, it's just another chapter. I mean, that's one of the things we're looking at, we have on our list was LED streetlights. Requiring now all streetlights are city-owned and metered, and we put that in.
Imagine that.
Council have any thoughts on that?
I like it.
On that approach versus an ordinance?
I like it.
Yeah, okay.
Great.
I have a question about design too.
Yes,
What's the standard width of a river walk?
It was changed in the critical areas law that was updated not too long ago.
Yeah, they had the narrow. Look at 8-foot width. No, that doesn't go to the thing. So I'm going to say roughly 8-foot width varies at some locations.
Okay.
But if you could say generally.
The most narrow is probably 6 or something of the sort.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Okay. I realize that, I want to go on with like sort of an idea about this, and I realize that a bump out would be impossible, a bump out into the waterway using the same flooring, the same footpath surface. But could there be cut-ins made throughout the length of the Riverwalk to accommodate benches, trash cans,
Oh, okay.
and
On the land side.
on the land
Yeah.
on the land
As they go
side?
landward?
Yeah, rather than having to leave the Riverwalk entirely and walk up a slope to get to a bench or a trash can or whatnot.
Okay. And that would fall into the Main Street, what the
Yeah.
standard we have for a bench, we could apply
Use the
that.
same standard.
And it'd be a perfect spot for a land as well.
Yep.
And, yeah, and I know I've harped on the Main Street lighting. If you walk the Riverwalk and look at the lighting there,
Oh, yeah.
there's even more.
More variety.
There's even more variety. And the little Salisbury Green on Market Street, there's 3 different types of lights
I
in
know,
there.
I know.
Okay.
All right.
Baby steps.
Well, yes. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. We are going to take I think we're done
You are,
with
you're done
Public
with
Works.
us. Yes.
Okay, the Mike and Amanda show is come to an end.
Till next time.
All right, so we're going to take a 5-minute break. I know we've got to change the tapes on PAC 14. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll come back at 6:31.